I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. It has been a very long time since I have done a solo podcast episode, so I'm a little nervous, but here we are. And there's probably a lot to catch you up on. I have been in major student mode this last year and creation mode and snagging a lot of lessons, a lot of hard lessons. And so I wanted to share those with you today. First off, though, we did cross our 300th episode last year. And I don't even know that we took time to stop and celebrate. So if you've been here with me since 2016, thank you. If you want a little prequel, you could go back to the 100th episode where I talk about some huge learnings. Really the first part of my career, first to mid. I don't think I'm at the third part, but let's just say that would give you a lot of context to this. So let's get going. We have a new year, and I want to share some of the things that I've been testing and working through over the last year. These will be in my new book, my next book, which will be out later this year, all about reinvention. But specifically today, I want to talk through some critical things I've learned and started to implement around reinventing my relationship with time and money. Time and money. So the reason I'm starting there is because I realize how much time and money have been kind of controlling how I feel. And we vote with our time, right? And everybody has a relationship with money. Anything is changeable on that front. But I realized something last year, and that was this. As I was traveling around, speaking, talking to so many different types of individuals and audiences, regardless of where I was and who I was talking to, from corporate to entrepreneurs to people in different countries, I noticed I have never seen the level of exhaustion in people's eyes that I see now, that I saw right then. And I still see this. And then I've looked in the mirror and I'm thinking, this goes for you too. I am definitely kind of an opportunity and a experiment junkie, I think you would say. So I love opportunity. I feel like I create it in every which way, maybe a little addicted. And I'm all about trying new things, right? And quick to start them. A why not now pro. And that can oftentimes create too much, create lack of focus, all the things. Like I call it like whack-a-mole goals, where you're focused on this one and you're like, boom. And then up pops the one over here. But anyway, so for whatever reason, which I have my theories, I'll spare you, the level of exhaustion is huge. And I see this in everyone's eyes, and I really see it in my fellow renegades, the women, female leaders, entrepreneurs, executives. I'm really seeing it there. So I started to think about this. I started to research. I started to dig in and make friends with the reality of my own data and my own situation, because I've been here before. I have flirted with burnout. I have married and engaged burnout, divorced burnout, found a new way. And I was really frustrated because I thought, I've learned these lessons. I know anything is possible, everything is not. I thought I conquered this. And just like anything, you really don't conquer anything. It's a daily practice. You have to continue to conquer it every single day. And not even conquer, but just focus and keep trying, recommit. And so it's really a mentality and a mindset and a daily practice of action, not just you learn the lesson and it's gone. So I realized, okay, and in speaking with different people, especially mentors, I said, I feel so regressive. I've been here before. I know these lessons. Why am I doing them again? One of the pieces of feedback was it's never the same because you're different. The data is different. And so I feel like in a way, if I got my master's in burnout, time management, where purpose, passion, and skill collide, bliss resides, learning to delegate, learning to focus on voting with my time, and my priorities are what I do, not what I say I'm going to do. If I had my master's before, maybe this is me getting my PhD. I'm like, I'll take that. Okay. And then secondly, when we look at lessons, and I've been working with a lot of different guides, which I'll talk a little bit about, but I asked Dr. Melanie McNally, who is a psychologist who is my brain and peak performance coach. I asked her, I said, in order for someone to change their behavior, to change the way they act, do they have to fully understand the root systemic cause, issue, character flaw, traumatic experience that caused XYZ? Like, do you really have to fully understand that? Or can you still change? And she said, as humans, we're still able to change. And there's a whole episode on that, recent episode, if you want to take a listen. But that gave me hope to, yes, we can focus on why we do certain things. That's important to understand how we're wired, to understand our motivations, intrinsic motivations, and adjust those. But we don't always have to be looking backward. I am so focused on forward and what can we do to take action, right? So those were two biggies. And when I started to really notice this was a problem for me was when my sleep was becoming less and less, but it was really becoming a lack of a priority. And I was using getting up earlier and earlier as a strategy, which it is not, because time is not infinite and sleep is required. And it's not just nice to have so you feel better. It's literally neurologically required. Again, Dr. Melanie McNally and I talk about that in a recent episode. But in order to create new neural pathways and to operate and function at our highest ability in an optimized way, we have to get certain levels of sleep. So I started looking into the science, and I really like data and I like facts. As creative as I am, and I'd say I'm a creative, I am very much a numbers and explain the science person, because that's when I usually buy in even more, right? So I had to become friends with reality and friends with data. And so I started looking at sleep. Got myself an Oura ring, which I don't know if you knew this, and this isn't necessarily across the board, don't quote me on this, but for me, I can use my HSA card for my Oura ring. Isn't that cool? So your health savings, tax friendly health account, that's cool. Anyway, check your authorities before you take my word for that, for sure. But that's cool. Okay, sleep. There's different types of sleep, REM, deep sleep, so on and so forth. So I had to learn, right? And what I realized is I had become so busy, chronically busy, one of those individuals that annoy me. I became one, where I was so tapped with my bandwidth. And this is a biggie. Let me explain kind of this concept. But I had my 24 hours in a day, and I was doing things that I am not uniquely qualified to do. I don't like, I shouldn't be doing, maybe I'm not even good at. So there's someone better who likes it more, so on and so forth. So when we look at this concept of bandwidth versus capacity, this is when the light bulb came on for me last year. Bandwidth is our 24 hours in a day. We all have them, right? They're finite, do what you will, do what you want, but we're all the same. How we use them, that's different. Now, capacity is infinite, right? That is our unique potential. There's no ceiling. We can always fly higher. And I think of it kind of like this. So our capacity is what we're uniquely qualified to do on this earth. Or when you think about, if you've been listening for a while, you'll hear about one of my favorite concepts that I created years ago. And it's where purpose, passion, and skill collide, bliss resides, right? So there's a sweet spot in that intersection. So if you have a Venn diagram, purpose, passion, skill, that middle where they all intersect, that is your unique capability. That is what differentiates you from being on this earth. And so that's capacity, right? Infinite. You can always fly higher. It's this potential. And so your zone of genius, whatever you want to call it, that's what we're talking about there. And so think about an airplane, right? With airplanes, when they're flying at altitude, they require less fuel because they belong up there, right? They're more efficient at altitude. That's what they were created to do, right? So when we are up here in our capacity, doing what we're uniquely qualified to do, we require less fuel. Up here, this is where joy lives. This is where, in my experience, profit and income lives. This is where that feeling of flow, that I was born to do this, sense of accomplishment and purpose lives. And it's definitely one of those things where, all these benefits, unlocking more potential in your DNA, that's exciting. You can always fly higher. There are no bounds. But when we are tapped here at our 24 hours in a day, and we are moment to moment, everything's scheduled, and we're rushing around and we're fitting everything in and we're responding to everyone and we're constantly on defense and it feels chaotic and we feel so stretched that we're about to snap. There's a difference between that and feeling stretched in a good way, that you're learning and you're being pressure tested in a good way, versus something's going to happen here. So when we're up there in that capacity, those are the types of feelings that we have, right? So bandwidth, I look at how I was spending my time, and there were still so many things that I was doing that could have been deleted, completely removed, or delegated, or optimized, really. And I'll share today a few of the things that I've been doing, tactics, and this is a 3-part series, by the way. So I'm going to build upon this and share with you, some of these specific fundamentals, but then the literal, tangible, tactical things that I'm doing to solve for and put these concepts into execution, and the results and the things to look out for. So that bandwidth, when I am stretched and when you are tapped at your bandwidth, then you're like shaking almost, right? You can't even think straight. You're exhausted. Waking up early and earlier is your strategy. You're not recovering. You feel like you're never going to win this battle. You're never going to catch up. When you're tapped here, you're trapped here. So what does that mean? That means your capacity is limited. You box yourself in. And I'll never forget the moment when the light bulb came on for me with this concept, because I literally was learning something new and feeling so much joy, and I had some space. And I realized I had been boxed in. I boxed myself in. And I was impacting everyone around me, right? Because that's what happens. My family, my team, myself. That's when I'm like short-tempered. I was yelling more, just getting upset and feeling resentment. And I can't claim that I've fully figured all of this out. But I can tell you that these things that I've started implementing are definitely making great progress. So when we're tapped here at our bandwidth and we have no space, we're not optimized, we're not managing this, then we're trapped. And there's no chance of continuing to grow. And that sense of growth is huge because, as you've probably heard me talk about before, perceived progress and perceived control are ingredients of happiness scientifically. So Tony Hsieh, a mentor of mine who unfortunately is no longer with us, but that is one of the very first things he taught me in 2008. Some of the ingredients of happiness, and two specifically scientifically, are perceived progress and perceived growth. And it doesn't have to mean huge things. It could mean small, tiny aspects of our day, of a project, of our life. It could be huge. Whatever that is perceived control is a sense of, oh, I've got this, right? It brings a level of calm. Things feel under control, even though it might just be perceived, right? And we may have very little control over a lot of things, but we do have control over certain things. So perceived progress and perceived control live up here. So if you are feeling boxed in, I was too. And there are moments where I am again. And that's when I realize, oh, I'm boxed in. What's going on here? Something has to shift. Something has to really be looked at and addressed. Now, when I realized this concept of I'd boxed myself in, was that I was learning something new and really excited, listening to podcasts about it, diving in, and I just felt this sense of growth and joy and desire to just learn more. And I realized, wow, I had to create time for that. So something had to give, or something had to be optimized or delegated or deleted. And if you're not feeling that sense of growth and doing what you want to do, right, in that zone of genius where passion, purpose, and skill collides, then there's a good chance that you've boxed yourself in. And there are so many other individuals that I know, some of my very best friends, who we talk about this concept and they're like, yes, that's exactly it. You feel stunted, not only stunted, you felt held back. Okay. So now what do we do with this information? Looking back, this is my 16th year as an entrepreneur. The number one reason I wanted to leave the corporate world, and the number one reason I did, was because I wanted to design my own day. That is it. I value freedom in a big, big way. It is extremely important to me. And it's probably back to that perceived control, right, idea. And what I realized is that leap of being able to design my own day, and I see this all the time with especially individuals who they'll leave corporate thinking, I want more freedom, I want more flexibility. And what they do is they end up creating something that's actually even worse. They have less, right? They create a prison and they make it actually even their world less flexible and more strict and more pressure to where they feel that they don't have the ability to kind of do what they want to do. So that's pretty much what I had gotten myself back into. And this ebbs and flows and you can adjust it, but be on the lookout. So what do? I went back to my tactics. I went back to what I learned. The first thing renegades do when they join Renegade is they map out their ideal day. And so this is stuff I knew. This is stuff I teach, but I had to go back to that exercise. And what do I mean by your ideal day? I mean, you look at a piece of paper or you look at your calendar and you think through and you feel, what is my ideal day? What am I doing? Literally, when am I waking up? Who am I with? What am I focused on? Like, what skills am I using? Am I outside? Am I inside? How much time am I in front of the computer? How much time am I in meetings? Am I traveling? So on and so forth. So we want to reverse engineer our lives and what we do and our big goals into our ideal day, right? Because the big goal is to spend your time how you want. How we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And so often people will come to me during big times of transition. I feel like everybody sends me their friends or makes introductions. You got to talk to Amy Jo when someone's about ready to do something big, whether it's shift careers, pivot, or move from the corporate world into entrepreneurship, or maybe back in, or try something new, launch something, so on and so forth. And one of the first things I say, which I know these things, but I had to reapply it to my life. One of the first things I say is, what do you want your day to look like? Because that's where we want to start, not, hey, I want to go tackle XYZ or build XYZ company. Okay, that's great, but we need to make sure that we know and we have a clear target of what we want our moment to look like, because that is going to indicate your level of joy, happiness, fulfillment, purpose, not necessarily this other thing. You might be focused on some company that you've dreamt up that has a great deal of purpose, but you're spending your days not doing what you want to do. That's never going to last. That's not sustainable. And that's not likelihood of you considering that success and worth it is very slim. So what do you want your day to look like? I went back to the drawing board and I mapped out how I want to spend my time. And what's fascinating is most of us overestimate our bandwidth and we underestimate our capacity, right? So we think we have more time than we do. Just like when people say, hey, if you're going to build a house, expect it to take 3 to 4 times longer than you think, or expect the budget to potentially be a lot larger than you think. It's kind of like that with bandwidth, right? We think we have time to do all these things, but do we really? And it's not a bad thing, because like for me, especially when it comes to opportunity, even if all these things in my bandwidth that's making me shake are things I enjoy, it's still tapped, which I'm going to trap myself then, right? So you have to really be willing to get truthful with yourself, right? And be honest and look at, okay, where am I spending my time? So I took literally the hours in the day, and I have a spreadsheet for this, and I made a time budget. And I mapped out exactly where I want to be spending my time, on what, with who, doing XYZ things, personally and professionally. And you know what? We've got 24 hours in a day, and we've got 7 days a week. So those are your parameters, right? And we can't create more. So I started mapping this out, and you can imagine kind of like a Tetris jigsaw puzzle. I realized there were a lot of things that something had to give, because there literally wasn't enough hours in the day. So I really like to look at deep work as something that warrants a decent allocation of time in my day. And so I know certain things, projects, activities require deep work, time. Writing. I can't hop in and out in 20 minutes between meetings, right? Studying for something big, like a big new license or exam or certification or something that requires deep work. Working on my keynote speech, whether it's rehearsal or writing, that's deep work, right? Learning something new. So for me, I had to kind of reverse engineer, well, how many hours in the day, how many hours in the week, how many hours in that month? I know I want to spend XYZ hours working per se. I'm excited to be picking up Lincoln and taking him to school more often, spending more time with him in the mornings. We have our own routine. We do a word of the day, we do a gratitude circle, and then a few times a week, we write a little letter to someone that we're grateful for as an appreciation letter. Like, these are all things that bring me huge joy. And so I start mapping down to the hour, not to be like even more restrictive and bandwidth, boxing, but to also budget in flexible time, to budget in deep work time, to budget in a little time for comms. And that is a kicker for me. Communication inbound, outbound, that almost set me over the edge this last year when it comes to being over capacity, over bandwidth, right? And really boxing myself in. So I'll talk through the tactics there. But I have this Excel spreadsheet. It's color coded. And I started with just my 5 days during the weekdays. And I've had a schedule. And yes, it's going to shift. And yes, I'll end up having travel in there. But you know what? My decision making has shifted drastically. Not only when I say yes to things or what I say yes to, but also my ability to estimate how long something's going to take. I'm getting a little more real and accurate. If I'll get on an airplane, that's another thing. Almost set me over last year. I knew how to plan for 22 days on the road in September, but just because I knew how to make it happen, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? I knew that was going to be a big deal, and I loved everything I was doing, but it was too much and not properly accounted for in terms of recovery and spaces between and delegating the things between that still had to happen, so on and so forth. So you get your time budget out, have your hours, you know how many in a day, and you start mapping. And so I got to the end here, and then I had some key decisions to make. What could go? I call this my year of the red pen, literally, right? And it's not just red pen, yes, time and money. I am striking a lot of things that I was doing before, but it's also boundaries. I'm not talking about balance here. I still think balance is bullshit, but boundaries, yes. I do believe my own boundaries with myself and with the external world, that is a huge area of opportunity for me, a huge area for growth, because I wasn't being real with myself. And so those boundaries, whether it's access or the boundaries I have with myself to decide how much something is going to, how long something's going to take and how much time I'm willing to give to it versus, oh yeah, I'll do it. A lot of it's up here. So I had to kind of recalibrate those. And I put my priorities in first into the time budget. And anybody can do this. Get out a piece of paper or blank Excel or Google Sheets and put your priorities in first. Sleep and Lincoln, right? And I knew I would have built in time to myself because that's a big priority too. Then you can start stacking. And so I filled up, my time budget. And then I had all these other things. And it's kind of like a financial budget. Yeah, this is how much money you have. And this is what you want to spend against, and or these are your expenses. And the thing about time though is you can't create more. With money, you absolutely can. So this is even more critical. So I had these big things. Some of these were like big decisions to make. And I knew how many hours, and you have to get surgical with the red pen, but also with the data. How much time is that really going to take, that 1 hour monthly meeting? Well, I've got prep time, I've got communications to schedule, the back and forth. Then I actually have to do the thing. And then what follow-up is there? And is there transition time in between that and the thing before it? And so you start getting very real. And I realized I don't have these extra 10 hours a month. Am I willing to go back here to my time budget and remove some of these priorities? Maybe 1 hour over here, 1 hour over here. But I'm probably not going to be able to find 10. And if I do want to do that, then something has to drastically shift, right? And my calendar, my time budget, it's very unique to me. It's very alternative, as I call it, right? I'm not a let's sit down 8 to 5 type of person. I also no longer will work late at night unless it's something I'm thoroughly enjoying and I want to. But I just don't operate great at night unless I'm uniquely in the flow for writing or learning something. So I will not force that anymore. I used to do that maybe like 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 7, 6, but I haven't done that for years. I'm not going to jeopardize my sleep in that way. But how my sleep was being jeopardized was by the amount of pressure and stress that I was creating. I just wasn't able to sleep well because I was at bandwidth throughout my day. And that creates its own sets of problems. So the time budget's huge. And you can literally get down to seeing percentages. I know how much time it's going to take each week to do XYZ. You know your standing meetings. And this year, I learned this from Exos, which is an incredible organization led by Sarah Robb O'Hagan, who's the CEO. She's former president of Gatorade. She was at, all these other huge companies, and I have so much respect for her. She's been on the podcast, so you can listen. But at Exos, I went to this kind of peak performance training with them. And they suggested get rid of all your standing meetings at the beginning of the year and start fresh. And so I did that, other than one board meeting that I can't necessarily remove because it's a governance board. And if I want to be on it, I better show up at that time or go rally everybody else and get them to vote to change the time. But that's not going to happen. I don't want to do that. So I knew that thing was staying there. But every other stand-in meeting, I got rid of it. And I can add back in based on what I want my day to look like. So that was huge. And then I went to my calendar and I went and plugged in those blocks. And no, it's not going to be perfect. But what it does do is it gives myself boundaries, even flex time, right? There's a block there. And so if I choose to use it differently, that's my choice. But the incentive is, how do I want to feel, right? I want to be at capacity, even if literally pencils down moments and blocks where I'm with Lincoln. Like, that's joy. That's a unique type of capacity for me as a mom, as a human, right? That's a quality of life. So I went to my calendar and I mirrored. And I knew this is not going to stick perfectly. This is going to shift. It'll end up getting fluid and a little messy, but at least there were some new boundaries. And so I now know, and it sends a signal to my team, this is where I can schedule meetings for Amy Jo. And it might be pretty limited. I know, Tuesdays and Thursdays, I don't pick up Lincoln. So those afternoons are usually where I like to have my meetings. And that's because my deep work is on the front end of every single day. The first half of the day is blocked, right? Unless there's a unique reason and I want to take a meeting with someone that feels so important to me that I'm willing to break that boundary with myself and my goals, then I can do that. However, if someone's looking at my calendar, they can see when I'm available for those types of meetings, right? And it's okay if it's 3 weeks out, unless, again, we want to make a shift. And so it's definitely a mechanism that creates cost-benefit analysis. If this is a yes, this is a no. If this is a no, then I'm going to have an opportunity for a yes over here. All right. And what I can share is that this has been big for me. There's a sense of perceived control and progress. And it's not just winging it and having a clear calendar and hoping I get my writing done and I'm finishing up that manuscript for XYZ session or section or chapter, or hope I get rehearsal in for my new keynote talk. It's scheduled. So then we get to go in and we can find and schedule time for our defense, what I refer to as like defense activities too. These are tasks like responding to communication, inbound, emails, even outbound, things that I need to send. Unless it's deep work and it's a really critical email that needs to be thought through and it's communicating something very important, that can be done during afternoons too, usually, or times that aren't needed for my highest level of thinking and performance, which I know that's my mornings. I even have deep work time before the rest of the household gets up on certain days. And then there are certain days where I'm with Lincoln from the moment he gets up all the way until I take him to school. And that's the schedule, right? And we have our routine and that's the way it is. So I encourage you to do this because it'll do two things. One, it gives you a sense of perceived control immediately. Even if you don't have it all figured out, it's like you're taking action. 2, you will start to realize the filters in which you make decisions. You will start to realize where your priorities are. You'll start to play with this. And I think so often we feel like we can get stuck in the mornings, even like answering email. An email is not a to-do list, right? It's not our to-do list. That's defense. That's someone else's needs. They're asking for something from us, right? But first we need to feed ourselves. First we need to pay ourselves and fuel up ourselves. And for me, that's going on offense, and that's deep work. Writing, speaking, content creation, podcasting. I can do podcasting a little later in the morning. If it's like this, I prefer, if it's a solo podcast, I prefer, yes, focus. This is deep work to me because I don't have someone to bounce off of. But if it's a recording, I can edge it a little more toward that noon threshold. But I prefer not to use the time there if possible. If, Taylor Swift is calling, or, let's say someone that I really would love to have a podcast interview with. I don't know why Taylor Swift just popped to mind, and no shame, I might change my boundaries. So get it mapped ahead of time. What this did for me, looking at the whole year, I already know where a lot of my travel is, right? I know personally, like for vacations, if they don't get put in, they're going to be last on the list. They become defense. And I don't want to be reactive to my calendar to try and fit vacation or family time or big initiatives that are personal to me and important. I don't want to be responding to my calendar to fit those in. I want to be putting them there first on offense. So there's work travel I already know that's happening. Speaking engagements, certain conferences, got it. You can start putting things in, and it starts to give you this sense of capacity load management kind of, right? So even though, let's say like when that manuscript is due, that's going to be kind of a high capacity time. Even all the creation up to this point, it's going to take mental energy. It's going to take physical energy. It's going to be emotional. So I need to plan for that. So I have a roadmap every year. It's another thing we teach at Renegade. And this allows for you to zoom out and see the whole year from 30,000 feet. It's like a bird's eye view, right? And when I was pregnant with Lincoln, I had a line item. You are pregnant. You are, growing a baby. Because it's a reminder that takes energy, right? That's not just this invisible line item. That is going to require physical, mental, emotional time and energy, right? So those are important, because if you're, writing a book and launching a company and having a baby and moving across country and have a big shift in your relationship or something, like a big health thing that you're planning for, a surgery or who knows what, like that is a big deal. You should not stack those things, right? We want to definitely allocate those where it will make sense. That's real. It's a realistic scenario. And that's where, when you look at an opportunity, shelving things can be the quickest way of perceived control and future potential progress. So let's say someone said, hey, Aim, do you want to do XYZ? And it's going to require a big sense of time, but I really want to do it. And I look at my roadmap and it's like, no, there's no chance. I'll put myself over the edge in 2 seconds. I'll be shaking at bandwidth. But Q1 of next year, I could build that in. Or, Q3 is fairly light. Can we shelve it, park it over here in Q3, right? I've got batters on base that I need to bring around and, generate some runs here, put some points on the board before I start stacking and put people on, not even on deck, but start putting new people up to hit. Like, that may not make a lot of sense to you, but in my mind, it makes a lot of sense, right? So it could be in the batter's box or on deck, but you've got someone at the plate right now. They need to score. 3 people on base. Like, we need to get them around. Okay. I really digress there, but I'm not going to push stop because we're on a roll. Okay. I think we probably get it, right? I skipped a step. And I apologize, but if you haven't already done this, one of the first things, and you could actually do this in reverse. This is okay too, actually. So maybe I didn't skip a step. A time audit. This might sound daunting because you're like, oh my gosh, do I need to document every single thing in my day? And I don't know if you've been on like old school diets before where someone has, maybe not old school. I'm sure there's healthy versions, nutritionists that do this now, but you literally have to track everything you eat in a day, like down to the calorie. I don't do that anymore because it just didn't feel healthy to me, but we know, we've been there, right? So imagine doing that in your day. But you don't have to do this over the course of the week or a month. If you already have that in some form with time tracking, awesome. And if your calendar was specific and you can go back and eyeball it, great. But what you can do, sit down in front of a blank piece of paper on your computer or just literally a white sheet and map out all your tasks, everything you do. It doesn't necessarily have to have time allocated to it yet. But first start with everything. And this could be everything from, okay, I record the podcast. What else do I do in that vicinity? Well, I don't schedule them typically. I don't produce them. I'm not doing the editing. I'm not doing the promotion. I am reviewing notes ahead of time. There's someone usually helping me with research, but like get very real. Don't just put podcast. No, it's record podcasts and prep time and monthly meeting with the team for production in terms of who's going to be on the show next, reviewing a suggestion list and or approving it, helping if I need to leverage any of my relationships in order to get a guest, that would go on there too. But then go to the next thing and do this for your workday first, and then start doing it for your personal life. And if you just time box this and you literally have a Pomodoro, I've got a little time box thing, or set your phone up to record and give yourself 30 minutes. You'll be surprised at how quickly, because you know what you're doing. Just think through yesterday, think through your days, think through what you know has to get done that you do, and just make a list. Then go through the list. And I learned this from, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember, a friend of mine, Phil, who suggested you start then categorizing each item on the list. And one is kind of that capacity, what you're uniquely qualified to do. This is your zone of genius. You enjoy it. You're very good at it. You lose sense of time. It's like you're in flow. Okay, awesome. So if you're doing a task like that, podcasting for me, I love it. Interviewing, that's a 1. On stage speaking, love it. As long as I'm talking about and sharing what I'm excited about, that's a 1. Writing, so on and so forth. Then for the items that you're really good at, but you don't necessarily love it, and there's probably someone else that could do it that's just as good, and that's their 1, but it's a 2 for you, put a 2. This is what we refer to, Dr. Gay Hendricks talks about the zone of excellence. You're really good at it, but it's not your highest use of time, your highest good. And this is your zone of excellence. A lot of the people around us usually encourage us to play in that area because they know we're good at it. It comes easy and we could do it. Oftentimes we're doing these things because we know we could do them quicker than someone else, even though we could probably train or find someone else, and then we could be in a 1 and they could take over our 2s. So see how many 2s there are. Then 3s are, you know what? I'm not even that great at it and I don't enjoy it that much, but I spend my time doing it. And these are like prime areas to get rid of first. This is a 3. Put a 3 next to that line item. So when these are the types of tasks that you've been doing it for years and you probably have never questioned yourself and said, I probably don't need to do that anymore because someone else could do it. I could pay them, and my value in terms of my ROI of an hour here is so much greater than an hour here that I could outsource it and actually make a lot of sense financially to pay for someone to do that, because my earning potential is usually a lot higher up here. What's cool is that 3, the more, the better, because that should be where you're focused. We need to either get rid of those things. Do I really need to still be doing them? Or find someone else who can do it, or find a way to optimize it. Is there technology? Is there a way to batch or outsource or delegate to someone else on your team? Delete, as we talked about. And then down here, so we've got 1, 2, those are your 3s, 4s. You should not be doing these things. These are the things you can't stand. These are the things you're not good at. These are the things that you usually don't finish. You're actually a liability when you are responsible for doing category 4 things on your list. Okay, so just go through and do that. When I did this, I've done this many times. The first time I ever sat down to do this exercise, I thought it was going to take hours. It took me 25 minutes. Because you want to batch them in a way. You don't have to get super granular, but these are the areas where you're spending your time, and then you grade them, you rank them. So do that either before or after your ideal day. But if you're needing to find more bandwidth, which aren't we all, you're definitely going to need to do that, because those 3s, for sure, the 4s, we can't be doing those anymore, one way or another, right? But those 3s, and even some of the 2s, you're likely still going to be doing things in your zone of excellence that, the more we're flying at capacity, the bigger the ratio, the bigger percentage of things in our day are number 1s, right? And that's a sliding scale. I've learned in my just experience over the years, as I've grown in my not only career, but as a person, I'm finding myself, it's like I've earned more time in my 1. And I wish I would have started this decades prior, because you can get to spending most of your time in your 1 capacity quicker, right? That's awesome. That's quality of life. Perceived control, perceived progress. Okay, so when we get real with the data, that's when, and make friends with reality, that's when we can start really figuring out what can change. I have 3 tips. I'm going to wrap this up on some of the first things you can do if you are feeling like you are at bandwidth, like you're tapped, right? Which means you're trapped at capacity. Here are a few quick tips. Number 1, inbound communications. How much time you're spending in email. I'm going to dive into this more in this next podcast episode, the second part of this series. But we need to go on offense, right? One of the things that changed my life the most is I had 100% accountability, opened up way too much access in text messages. We have so many incredible renegades, and I love them all. And my superpower became my demise, because I love to give. I love to help. I see the potential in people usually before they see it in themselves, and then help them realize it. And the feeling, the high from that is incredible. So I like to give and communicate and help. And I've opened that door up so far that it became unmanageable. There was a moment when I had, I think, 245 unread text messages. That's just not me whatsoever. I don't operate that way. I'm not the person that has an inbox of thousands, or even if it's beyond scroll level on my laptop, my inbox, I'm not liking it, right? Because I like to know what's in there. I like to have a sense of perceived control. So what I did is I found that you can set an out of office text message auto responder that's custom. Not only custom, the message being custom, but secondly, who gets that, who's negated from getting that response. I had to kind of do a little bit of triage at one moment when I was so overwhelmed with this 200 plus inbound text messages that I created. This wasn't their fault. This is my accountability. I created that situation, that I had to get it back under control and redirect and find new ways to deal with that. And what I did is I set an auto text message responder and I cleaned that up. So it was from me, it was kind, and it directed the individual. It said basically, hi there, my text inbox is full. However, you can do this or this if you need to get a hold of me and it's urgent. So what I then did for people who I knew I didn't want to get that message is you can go and negate them from receiving that, right? Certain people. So you can go into your contacts and actually set certain people as they're exempt, right? So this is family. These are key friends. These are key coworkers. These are key clients. That was important to me because they are a priority. And so that helped me gain instant perceived control. If you have just kind of operated and started to find that text is now the new email for you and it's overwhelming and it's another place to respond, you have to retrain yourself and retrain others on how you want to communicate. That's been huge for me. And so now I'm very cognizant of what I use text for and what I don't, and who I give my mobile number out to and who I don't. So that was a key. Number 2, I also have used voice notes instead of meetings. I'm taking very few meetings because I've gotten so tired of the back-to-back-to-back Zooms. That's not me. That's not my ideal day. I found days where I really wasn't going outside hardly at all. I don't like that. And that's not how I used to operate, but it slipped kind of back into this bad new habit. So that has shifted, right? So how many meetings do you really want in a day? Not what is everybody else asking you to do? And then can some meetings be walking meetings? No camera. Can you do a 3-minute voice note instead of a 30-minute meeting or an hour meeting? And that's cool because then you're on demand and the person can listen when they're ready. You can hear sentiment. It's better than taking 20 minutes to email something in a paragraph form. And you can communicate quickly. You can do that via text. You can do that via Slack, wherever you find voice notes make the most sense. Microsoft Teams. That was huge. And then here's another biggie. Really paying attention. This is a bandwidth bankrupter. Gossip and assuming. And I don't mean just like the chatty kind of mean girl gossip or annoying gossiping about other people. Yes, that for sure. But also just maybe judging a scenario and the way someone might be navigating something that you're not even involved with and you wouldn't consider it gossip, but it's taking time and energy into even discussing it, right? Whether it's at a happy hour with a friend or in another meeting or with a spouse, or assuming things that haven't happened yet that you don't have data on. So assuming something's going to happen, that's a complete guess, right? Spending time gossiping about yourself. And that's true. Like literally it's judgment in a way, and not doing anything about it, or talking about other people or situations that have nothing to do with you. And even if they do, not just talking about them, but arriving at a solution or a next step versus just ruminating and circling and spinning, assuming something that you have no data for, and that creates more worry, more fear, more anxiety. Look at the facts. What does the data tell you? The reality versus the emotion. Those have been huge. And in the next series, I will talk a little more tactically of if you're in a situation where you are at bandwidth just tapped, what can you do immediately, right? And then how do we expand our capacity more, right? So we want to manage and optimize that bandwidth and expand and scale and stretch our capacity. And if you think about your personal brand, what's so cool is when we've built a brand for ourselves, and remember, you don't brand yourself, you are yourself. That creates a brand. But when we are our true selves, and we're exuding that, we're sharing that brand essence with the world, online or offline, that means our presence is present when we are not. So it allows us to fly higher because literally we're creating more time for our presence to resonate and have an impact. It's kind of like scaling yourself and scaling the time in your day, right? Your impact is more scalable when your brand is more potent, more strong, when it's showing up for you in places and ways and at times when you're not even there. So we'll talk more about that next time too. A couple of quick tips on the gossip front. If you find yourself in a scenario with someone else and they're talking about someone else, has nothing to do with you, or a scenario that you have no control over, that you're just not wanting to spin and talk about. If they're talking about someone else, you can say things like, you know what? I don't think this scenario really has anything to do with me. Have you tried talking to the other person? Or can we actually talk about this? Redirect. Or, I don't have any interest in discussing that. However, you might try talking to XYZ person or address that thing. And what's kind of cool is you'll be known quickly for not being willing to go there and do that. So you'll find less people come to you to talk about that type of thing or in that type of way because you just don't engage. It's like, oh, she doesn't do that. That's not a good use of my time. And you can say that too. I don't feel like this is the best use of my time, but you know what? I love to focus on this. I don't feel that's the best use of our time. I have no control over that whatsoever. However, here is what I would love to focus on. Like those are the types of things that you can say. And without further ado, let's wrap this up. And I'm excited to be back kind of in that solo podcast episode seat after being so long. And thank you for listening. And I'm excited to share some of the things I'm learning from other people. I'm learning from practice over the last year plus, and things that are new that I'm just starting to experiment with. And I love your feedback. So thank you for listening, and get ready to get into the next series, the part 2, where we'll dive deeper into these concepts. And the next episode, I will talk through the 3 buckets of what I plan to leave behind in the last year, what I plan to take with me, and what I create new, what I will create new. And I shared this list in my email newsletter, my email updates. So if you have not subscribed and you want to get those, feel free to head to amyjomartin.com, and it'll give you an opportunity to sign up. But that's where we will start next time. Okay. So thank you, and we'll see you next time. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your why not now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now? Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us.